£768 million in sales, £250 million in inventory now.
Yeah.
That's not a small thing. That's pretty up there.
When I first started, I did a deal really quickly, and then I didn't do a deal for 9 months. And I remember literally crying every single day in the office.
How you leverage technology as an agent better than everybody else.
Seeing this dashboard, I can tell my clients where in the world these buyers are coming from, what is it that's kind of piquing their interest, because you can track what's got the most engagement, and it's enabled me to work with brokers from all over the world.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of The Real Ones. Today, I'm joined by the one and only Jessica Bishop. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, well,
Delighted
you're
to be here.
Busy woman, and I'm very glad to have you, taking the time out for this.
Of course, I'm honored. I've been watching the journey and growth of the podcast. I've been loving it.
Oh, that's a funny thing that you should say. The reason that, and you don't know this, which is the funniest part. Last summer I was in here, right, at these offices, kind of upstairs, and you came up to me asking me about some sort of tech problem.
Yeah,
right?
I remember.
Yeah, and I was like, wait a second. So these guys are really good at sales, and they're really good at like the negotiations and the market knowledge, domain, all that is awesome. But tech is something they could always use more help with. And I was like, I should do something with this. And then I basically flew all around the world, New York, and started meeting agents there. And turns out everyone has that problem.
Yeah.
And then you kept doing it, and we basically went to Dubai, and now there's like a bunch of brokerages that work with us because you said, hey, how do you fix this thing? And I was just like,
so what's the commission?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, well, our commissions are very small. I don't know about you, but then Daniel's gonna be like, hey, technically you only met her because you were in mine.
Yeah, but that's cool.
That's
really
cool.
So
it's kind of like unique, like how these serendipitous things sort of happen, and then you do these things. You have had a very, very trailblazer like career, I would say. You're super young. And you're also super prime queen now. So tell me about that, right? Is that is that something that you find that personal branding is obviously key, and having something that people can remember is important. Yeah. So why super prime queen?
Personal branding is super important. Like we all know that, right? And you want to be known for something. Yeah. And I am very well known within the industry for dealing at the upper end of the market. I've done a lot of transactions at 20, 30, 40 plus million. And at my previous firm, I ended up selling more homes above £20 million than anyone else when I was there. And that market is dominated by men, and not old but much older men than me, so it's actually quite a niche bracket that I'd plugged there. So I was like, I am the queen of selling super prime homes, and probably the only queen. So
wow. Controversial opinion.
Yeah,
all the other women on my podcast just gonna be like, what's going on? I know. So, okay, very interesting. And we'll get into your journey and all that kind of stuff. But before all that, I just want to ask you what you wanted to be when you were 7 years old.
I think I wrote astronaut, accountant, and lawyer, like pretty generic things. And I obviously had 3 because I didn't know what I wanted to do. So the lawyer stayed with me right up until just before I transitioned to being an agent.
What do you mean? So you did
that was what I wanted to.
Okay.
That's what I wanted to do, and I was applying to do a law conversion course and was going down this route. And then I started working for an agency on the side, just earning money whilst I was doing this. And then I was kind of like, hey, this is actually really fun, and everyone that I know that's a lawyer is really not enjoying the studying, not enjoying the work, and the family friends I knew who were very senior lawyers were still not enjoying it 40 years later. So I was like, why am I doing this? Yeah,
I mean, you get the nice little profit share at the end of the year, I guess, but beyond that, it's you're reading between the fine print, and I'm sure there's people that enjoy that. Just not,
definitely, but just not
the super prime queen energy, you know what I'm saying?
Not me, exactly.
So talk to me about your journey, right? Like you go from wanting to be an accountant on Mars to to now being this real estate force. So tell me about that. How did it all begin? And I know you had some time in corporate and now you're doing this. So,
yeah. So I kind of always had an eye on the property market because my dad was a developer. So, you know, there was always kind of property by osmosis in our house. And on my gap year, I started working for this agency because originally I'd worked in a pub and wasn't saving any money or doing anything productive. So I started working for this agency again, sort of got my eye into it. And then post uni, as I just mentioned, started working for the same company again. And I was working for them as a negotiator. And I said, you know what, actually, I want to move to a big firm. I think this will, you know, broaden my horizons and give me access to greater people and properties. So I actually took the step back to become an admin assistant within one of their flagship offices, which didn't play to my strengths as a dyspraxic person that doesn't like being told what to do. But I did that for, you know, 9 months, and that gave me the opportunity when an internal sales role came around, and I went for the job and I got it, and then I was there for 2.5 years, and I was then one of the highest billers in the company up to a certain threshold. We called it core, so that was up to 4.5 million. And then I moved to that was in North London, and then I moved to the Kensington office, and started working in the prime team, which was between 3 to 10 million pounds. And that was kind of, I worked with 3 very senior established men who had a lot of knowledge and experience within the market. And I should have been in that role for probably the next 10 years or so. And then for various reasons, each of those 3 people left within the space of a month. And so suddenly I was the only one in this team who had, you know, wasn't managing these clients, but had been around the houses, knew them, knew the clients and everything. And suddenly I was managing this whole book, and I was completely thrown into the deep end. And it was a very intense 4 months, you know, going from a team of 4 to 1, waiting for the new people to kind of come into the market. I actually had like a nervous breakdown and was like signed off for 2 weeks because it was just so much unbelievable stress. But it was amazing, and that kind of gave me the platform to showcase I'm perfectly capable of dealing with these clients. I think I'm actually very good at it, you know, because our clients, they don't want to talk to someone who's done a master's in real estate. These guys have made their money because, you know, they are super finance whiz, tech, whatever. They want to talk about a million different topics, which I think I'm very good at, having like a broad knowledge base. And that's where you make these connections and build these relationships and strengthen them. And I had the opportunity to do that because these 3 people had left, and it always had made my case very clear to my business that, you know, you didn't need to do, you know, your master's at Reading or Brooks to become a sales agent, which was the traditional role historically. And I always felt it was people from different backgrounds that would be much better suited to this. And that kind of started the process of hiring from slightly different backgrounds than my previous firm. And I really, really pushed that. And I push that hugely now because real estate is not even now pushed as a great career option. You know, in school when you have careers counselors and things, it's just not pushed here in the UK. And so I'm now actually going into schools and talking to them and talking about, you know, what an amazing opportunity it is. And particularly if you're, you know, kind of neurodiverse and not on that traditional, you know, path stream, it's an amazing career.
What do you mean by neurodiverse? What?
Dyspraxic, dyslexic, ADHD, any form of neurodiversity like that. If you look at all across industries, you know, including finance and things, it'll generally be less than 10% of people are neurodiverse. But in real estate, it's 50%. It's like disproportionately in favor of neurodiverse people who are the great agents, who are able to communicate effectively with loads of different groups of people, who are able to have all the soft skills that make being an agent very good and probably think about things, you know, slightly differently.
So that's interesting. That's an interesting thing to be passionate about. Why do you care about that? Like, as in, why did that, like, sort of, because there's a lot of statistics out there about various different problems and, you know, in industry, and why did this particular one stand out to you as something that you wanted to go and help out with?
Well, I'm dyspraxic myself, which meant it means your hand-eye coordination is not very good, and my handwriting is sometimes illegible, and kind of the way, it's just the way you think about things is very different. And I went to a very academic girls' school, which you learn in the way that people have been taught for the last 7,000 years. Education has not changed in that function at all, and it didn't necessarily suit me, and I still did well, but it didn't fit that pathway. And the roles and jobs that I was told I should focus on as a result of that were not anything that actually suited my skill set. And there are a lot of people who, I think it's better now from what I hear, but who struggle with dyslexia or dyspraxia or ADHD. Like, if you're sat in a classroom being talked at for an hour and you've got ADHD, that's not going to work well for you. That doesn't mean you're less capable at understanding or learning or have a lower intelligence, because none of these affect the intelligence of the individual. It's the way that you process information and the way that you deal with information. And so why should these people not play to their strengths and not have the opportunity to play to their strengths just because the Greeks 7,000 years ago said, let's sit in a line and learn from a tutor?
That's very interesting. So I'm sorry about double clicking on that. It's just that I have like hundreds of these conversations, and like when I hear something interesting like that, I'm just gonna pause for a second. And I think that's interesting because I've seen you on your stories and things like that bring you've always asked like, oh, if you're a woman in real estate or other, you're still doing your education, you want some experience, because a lot of people today ask for 5 years of experience when someone's fresh out of uni, and you're kind of trying to help them bridge that gap, and you bring them along with you, you take them to your viewings, which you still haven't taken me to be honest.
Okay, you have
we will do that, but I can see you really try to push for that. How do you think the system in general should improve? Like you said, it's 7,000 years ago. What should they change to a better accommodate?
The whole education system?
Yeah. Let's talk about
Okay, give me a second.
Real estate in a minute. If you want to watch, you got to stay tuned. I'll timestamp the real estate part in that for you real estate nerds, but
if you look at kind of anything now, everything is tailored to the individual, right? Kind of like with your interests or your skill sets in work. If you're a processor, you'll be put in this, maybe you'll be replaced by AI, but they're having to learn what they want to shift to. In school, there is there's no specialization whatsoever in the way that you teach. So if you have a class of 30 people, the likelihood that you all learn at the same ability is different, right? So then you'll be split into sets. But you'll be split across the year. So then each set will be, top set, middle set, bottom set. But within those sets, you still need to break it down further. And probably it needs to be much more along this neurodiverse manner. I mean, I don't know, I'm not an educational specialist, but understanding how each of these guys learn and breaking the sets up that way.
I think that's very interesting because it's a self-fulfilling sort of prophecy. Right? The way that the sets are currently broken up, it's just like, oh, you got X percentage and the other person got slightly lower percentage, so they're in set 2 and whatever. I mean, maybe I was a set 2 kid, I don't know. Maybe it's coming from a place, but
even there are children who don't perform well in exams, and their intelligence is up here, but they deal with loads of anxiety, right? So they don't perform well in their exams. And I know children who haven't reached the potential of what they thought they would because they can't perform in that situation. Please give me a real world situation where you sit in an exam hall, with someone timed. Like it doesn't happen that way. There needs to be much more like real world life experience. And I mean, I studied classics, so I loved that because I learned so many different things, like, from history, poetry, literature, whatever. I think it's really important to have a broad knowledge of different subjects, but, to bring it kind of into the real world and say, how will you use this in the real world? Should we make these classes more interactive rather than just sitting and preaching? That's not the way. Look at our attention spans on TikTok nowadays. Like, they just need to almost, maybe that's how you teach, pick that up and do it in like 2-3 minute spurts and rotate people around, keeping their brains engaged.
I think that's very interesting. And, you know, with what you said about like, you know, sharing stories and like thumb stopping sort of content and things like that, we obviously see you sort of going out there, building your digital sort of portfolio. And that's probably what I think, if you're not on social media as a real estate agent, it's your, you know, well behind kind of thing. But there's also a certain element to doing it well. What do you do differently to everyone else right now that you think that, you know, you're kind of standing out because of that?
So I think there's a real, or what I personally enjoy is more educational content, you know, not just this is a pretty house. Like there are lots of accounts that have
from the streets.
Yeah, in the streets.
In the streets.
Exactly.
Sorry, in the streets, my bad.
It's okay.
Yeah.
And you know, that have lots of aesthetically pretty content, which is really good. And these accounts have loads of followings. But I was thinking, what can I do that will differentiate myself? And it's, you know, I've actually sold some of these homes. I've been into lots of these houses. I can give you information that you can't access by looking at an interior designer's account or, you know, just beautiful photos. So I'm really trying to align kind of the real estate porn that everyone loves with a bit more information, you know, edutainment behind that. And that's what I get the most engagement on with as well. You know, people love asking questions about it and following up with me and getting DMs and things. And you don't get as much engagement with your community when it's just sort of a pretty photo, I think.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the people that you're dealing with especially are people that already know quite a bit. So if you're teaching them something new, then they're probably more likely to do a deal with you, I think.
Yeah.
And if you can't teach them something new, whatever it might be, whether it's like domain expertise in that particular area of London or that particular designer or anything like that, I do think that it's quite difficult to, you know, impress them in that sense, because they have a ton of volume coming their way. There are a lot of real estate, you know, agents out there. So standing out in the sense that, hey, A, you've kind of drawn them in with your content, and then B, you're educating them and teaching them something that they don't already know about. I think that's a very good way to sort of...
Yeah, it gives me credibility and authority in the space that I... you know, want to be in, but that's also not detracting from people who maybe just want to, you know, glance at pretty houses.
Yeah, fair enough. And speaking of pretty houses, you've got about, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, you've done about 768 million pounds in sales. Yeah. Right? And you've got about 250 million pounds in sort of inventory now. Yeah. Right? That's not a small thing. No. That's pretty massive.
It's not.
Is that pretty, that's pretty well above market, right? Like in terms of like, let's say what an individual agent can bring to a table. That's pretty up there.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. Kind of.
It's giving me thinking, wow, this is why my diary is so jam-packed. Yeah, it's been a wild ride since being at DDRE for a year or so. But, you know, I think it just shows it was completely the right decision for me. You know, I've had clients that followed me. I've had clients that now want to work with me from kind of knowing DDRE and then knowing my expertise and how that can help them. And then also from, you know, from socials, I've got about 20 million pounds of that purely from someone finding me on Instagram, which is, we know how much of an incredible tool Instagram really is, or all socials, but actually, you know, when you get a lead and a listing, that's still a huge coup to say, yeah, you know, this is all worth it.
Is the dream then to be a $10 billion sales, you know, super prime queen, or what happens after that? Because, you know, you've seen endless amount of numbers now. One house is worth 25 million, another one's worth 100 million, whatever it is. And at some point you have to get numb to those things. And yes, the money's good, but what is kind of the goal for Jess Bishop?
Wow, that's a question here.
It is a question.
It is a question.
It's the real one.
It's the real one. I think you've got to kind of break it down. And, you know, my short-term goal for the moment is really cementing my position kind of within London and globally. Because here I have an opportunity to really be an individual. And whilst at my previous firm, you had that to a greater extent than others, you're not positioned, you know, on a global platform as much as, hey, I'm Jess Bishop, I'm here, I can help you do all of this. You know, at DDRE, that is what I can do. And, you know, in my first year, if I've got £250 million worth of listings, then I hope, you know, over the next couple of years, I will secure my first $100 million sale. You know, I will hit through certain benchmarks like that, that I, you know, aspire to, and build a team around me. You know, I hired Stina, who's my EA, in the last 2 months. She is unbelievable. She's amazing. And that has kind of really like compounded my efforts over the last 3 months and enabled me to take on all of these listings and work. So I think, you know, over the next kind of 2 years, it's going to be to expand my team in that sense and hit kind of some of those benchmarks. And then, from beyond there, we'll have to see.
So, but beyond, look, I know that you're going to hit that, like as in that and beyond, like as in you can just tell, like certain people do things a certain way, and you just know that they'll be successful. They'll do all the things that they're saying that they're going to do, just by a function of doing it every single day. Beyond that, what kind of keeps you going, I guess? Because there's, you know, markets are always up and down, especially in real estate. Like, you know, there's cycles. It's literally, there's periods of time when people don't buy anything, right? What kind of keeps you going in those times?
So I said, when I spoke to my accountant, you know, and I was being self-employed and whatever, and he's like, what are your goals? And for me, my goal is I want to pay off my parents' mortgage. And so that is what keeps me going now when, you know, I'm working in the evenings and I'm working in the mornings. And for me, that's the goal that makes the monotony of kind of every day, albeit it's very fun. You kind of wake up and you're like, okay, right, this is what I need to do. This is who I need to call, viewings, all of this, list, blah, blah, blah. That's what keeps me going. And I think it's, you know, we had a conversation in the office the other day about if you're not being KPI'd, do you need to have a goal? And some people think they don't need goals. And for me, I think it's my personal goal is what will keep me going in work. For me, that's really important, and that's what kind of keeps me up and going every day. And then once that's happened, which will happen soon, hopefully, maybe not too soon, then that will evolve into another personal goal. I don't know what that is yet, but for me, this is like my, you know, northern star at the moment.
Sometimes I struggle with thinking too far ahead into the future, and like kind of like with all the imaginary numbers and things like that. VC startup life is just that you have to imagine quite a bit before any of it really starts happening.
And you've got to keep yourself kind of present and in the moment, 100%. Right? And it was much easier in a corporate business. You go, okay, so this is this position I can get, then this position, then this position, then this position. So you could go, okay, my ultimate goal is to be senior partner, which is, you know, what I said at my previous firm, which is, you know, kind of 6 steps to hit. And you can say, okay, maybe that'd be 15 years. Like, that was very easy to do. Now, I think it's amazing to have the freedom to not do that, and the focus on the personal goal will inevitably then like push and drive how hard I work within my working life and sphere.
Right. And like to the outside world, and like, you know, and I'm sure to everyone at your office as well, you're killing it, right? But tell me about a time when it wasn't all rosy and it wasn't all trophies, you know.
When I first started, I did a deal really quickly. It was actually really funny. At the premiere of the Buying London, I came in to the row in the cinema and sat down next to this guy, and I was like, I really recognize you. And I was like, is it Stephen? He's like, no, it's Stuart. And I was like, oh my God, you nearly killed my first deal. And like 8 years ago, we'd had like a competitive situation with a buyer, which was on 2D Clifton Gardens, the first property I ever sold. And he happened to be sat there next to me, and he worked at Vickers, which was Daniel's first company. So that was like a really nice full circle moment. But so I did that deal really quickly, and then I didn't do a deal for 9 months. And I remember literally crying every single day in the office because I just, you know, like couldn't get it. It was 2016. They just increased like stamp duty. I didn't know what I was doing. I was working in the North London market, which is a very, very like interconnected market, which I'd never been to North London before. And that was really, really tough. And then, I did a deal kind of at the end of that year, and then it all sort of started clicking, and that was good. But I think it's when you don't do a deal as an agent, it can really affect, obviously, like your psyche, your energy, and everything that you put out. And you have to be really conscious to not let that affect the people that you're dealing with and meeting, because you can feel it, you know, when someone hasn't done a deal or their deal's fallen out of bed, they're like, oh, so down in the dumps. And then that just feeds off, you know, I really believe in like energy and putting it out there and stuff. And like you putting out that negative energy, just that's what it attracts. So that for me was like, and I think about it often still, how me literally crying in the office every day would like feed into that. And now you just have to focus on, you know, I know that I can do my job. I know that I can do it well. There will be market forces that I can't dictate, and I just have to keep close to my clients, keep doing that, and, you know, keep pushing forward. Probably the other difficult time, which I really find that funny that me crying in the office like skipped over this, but before I joined DDRE, I nearly died. I got shingles of the brain and spinal fluid, and I was on my gardening leave, went traveling for 3 months by myself around South America, which was amazing. Came back, and then collapsed, and they told my parents I was going to die. My brothers were in London. They had to come back to say goodbye to me in the hospital, and they found out that it was the shingles. And
what is that? I'm sorry, I don't.
So it's kind of like it's like chickenpox in adult form, and it's kind of like meningitis as well. So mine was in my brain and my spinal fluid, and my brain was basically exploding, which is when they thought I was going to die. And then when they knew that I wasn't, they said she's had so much swelling that she's going to be permanently brain damaged and probably won't be able to walk again. And then I was in a coma for a week, and then I woke up and was completely fine.
Whoa.
Yeah, so that was really intense, but that was in hindsight one of the best things that could have happened, because it was before I joined DDRE, and I remember being really nervous about, you know, being self-employed and not having a salary, having had a really stable income for 7 years. And now I was doing it all for myself. And that's when I had this chat, and I literally said, I know I can do my job. I know I can do it well. I know I can do my clients. Like, the money will come. Like, it will all fall into place. I just need to keep doing that. And because I had that experience, it meant that I definitely came into this with a different mindset than I think I otherwise would have done.
I think when the fragility of life kind of hits you in the face, it's everything else becomes pretty.
And that's probably why when you say, what's your worst experience? Like, that doesn't fling to me as a worst experience, because actually that was a super positive experience in the end. Less so for my family at the time. I had no idea what was going on. But that's meant that the last year has been much easier for me, and kind of my mindset and dealing with everything and the struggles of doing deals or not doing deals. Yeah.
Well, I that's a hard point to sort of go. No, but it's really inspirational. I think, like, you know, there's so many agents out there today. Like, we're talking about a Netflix show backed brokerage and things like that. So that's awesome. But there's a lot of agents that are going through a rough patch, like, in general, right? And, like, it just happens because if someone's doing really well, someone's doing really shit. Like, you know, sometimes maybe good, sometimes.
But it's like, it's funny, like, just looking back on the last 2 minutes of this conversation, like, as individuals, what we focus on. When you ask me what's the, like, hardest time in your life, I'm like, oh, when I wasn't doing a deal. But you mean when I had, like, a salary, a secure income, like, in a stable job, in a house that I liked, living with friends that I liked, and, you know, that's what kind of sticks in my mind. And as individuals, you know, probably we focus on the wrong things a lot of the time.
So what's your sort of I know you talked about sort of forward momentum and just like putting it out there kind of a thing. If you're going through that rough patch, what would your advice be to an agent that is going through a rough patch right now?
Wake up really early every morning. That's what I do. Wake up really early and then write down. Have you heard of intelligent change in the 5-minute journal?
Me? No, I just survived like no intelligent change.
So it's this like amazing like diary, which doesn't have, you can date it yourself, but basically it just says like 3 things that would be great today. What would you focus on? What would you want to focus on? And then in the evening you reflect on it. And I've had this same journal for like 4 years. And when I'm going through a difficult period, I revert back to it. I wake up in the morning, I write down and focus on 3 things that are good. What would be great? Could I do today that would be great? And then reflect on it in the evening. And then I go and I clear my emails, I do some work, and I get to the office, go to the gym after doing the emails, get to the office. And for me, that morning routine literally changes my mindset. And it's like super small, but I know it's really easy to not do. And that is what I always revert to when I'm going through a difficult time. That routine and consistency and focusing on the small things and just doing it every day.
Yeah, I found that to be so true, actually. Like, I had a bit of an academic setback that I can't really talk about. I have a lot of Indian aunties and uncles watching this stuff all the time. They literally they're on my tail if so like I'll
if you got an A-minus.
Most of my viewers drop off at about 30 seconds. And then the rest of them that are paying a lot of attention. So I gotta be careful. Okay. But I had this and I basically had to figure out how to come out of that pretty much, because as an Indian kid, my entire self-worth was associated with sort of getting an A star, whatever. Yeah. And if you're anything below that, it's like your life is over or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was just that, what you said, kind of waking up really early. It was like 5 a.m. run around the mall strip on the Buckingham Palace side, and just like doing that every single day for about a year, basically. Cooking my little tiny breakfast or whatever. I used to call it the Bank MD breakfast, because I pulled in everything that Marks and Spencer had, like ready to kind of cook, ready to
Love
whatever.
That.
Just put it all together, like the blueberry pancakes and then the whatever.
Yeah,
I know. And sort of just doing that consistently and showing up every day, even though it's extremely hard, because you see the people around you are all like progressing in life, and then you're just kind of like stuck. And it's the worst feeling in the world when you're in it. And then slowly but surely, because you show up every single day, something happens.
Yeah.
I think was it you that said this? There was something about opportunity meeting hard work or something like that. It's kind of what people call luck these days, I guess. But there's so much that goes into that particular.
So much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had 2 really interesting meetings this week, which towards the end of last year, I said, okay, I'm going to host a networking event. I'd done 1 deal since I'd been at DDRE, which had a delayed completion. So I didn't get to feel the gratification of that yet, i.e. the money in the bank. It was, it was a struggle. I was like, oh God, need to keep going. I was like, okay, I'm going to host a networking event, just like focus on doing something different. And invited these guys to it. One's like, the owner of like a private jet business, and then the other one works for one of the most luxurious hotel brands in the world. And I've had 2 super interesting meetings this week, which I'm trying to work out what I can say without going into. But that kind of would be perceived now as an amazing opportunity that I can do something amazing with these people. But actually that came from me taking the decision to go, okay, I'm going to host a networking event. I'm going to reach out to these people. I'm going to organize it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to invest my own money in it at the time when I had no money coming in of myself. I think it was like £1,200 that I had to, put into this event, which was like a lot. And I had, I think like £16,500 in my bank account to last me until when I had no idea when money was coming in. But I did that, and I'm seeing the fruits of it now. Yeah,
100%. I think it's hard to kind of take that bet on yourself and invest when things are not looking so great, but that opportunity that you sort of bounce on when it's super risky is what yields you the most return. Obviously, we've spoken a lot about how you're running your own business effectively, right, under the DDRE brand. Talk to me about the entrepreneurship component of this whole thing, right? You said you hired Stina.
Yeah.
Right, Stina. And it's not always easy to hire good talent. What do you kind of look for in the people that you work with?
It was really hard finding Stina. And I think I obviously spoke before that for me, a huge skill set of being an agent is having a broad interest and knowledge base, and not being, you can't pigeonhole yourself and be narrow focused, or you're then closing yourself off to loads of clients, and being able to kind of talk intelligently about a lot of different things. And I also wanted someone who was super driven and kind of willing to go to the next step. So ideally needed someone who was going to be a broker, but then knowing they were going to be an EA for me, and so not actually broking or deal doing themselves, albeit they'll have the opportunity to do so later. And that's quite like a hard trifecta of stuff to hit. You have an ego, you want to be an agent, but you're going to take the step back and be an assistant, which is ultimately what I did to put myself in the best position possible to then be an agent, right? Have that kind of sacrifice. And yeah, really luckily kind of found Stina, and she's been like completely amazing, because we sort of mirror each other in that way. And I think the most important thing for me is that I respect the people that I'm working with, and it doesn't mean I have to get along with them. I don't have to be like friends with them. I don't have to kind of like what they like or agree what they agree with. But if I can respect their work ethic, and actually now that I'm saying it, it mainly comes down to work ethic, and that's where I've struggled previously. People who haven't matched a work ethic that I think they should. Yeah. That's when I find it difficult to deal with them. Right. And respect, decisions that they make, which I've kind of had to learn that not everyone will work here where I work, and I do have to respect that. But that's been a difficult thing for me to learn.
Yeah, I think it's hard. You have to get everyone to feel the same amount of ownership and accountability that you do. But you're obviously getting the gratification, as you called it, quite significantly, and their gratification is not as much. So at least to start off with, right? So I think it's like giving them that sense of they believe in you, right? Buying into you as a person, as an individual, as someone they look up to, is a big component of that I think a lot of people fail to filter for. Because you can go and work for somebody and do a role, but then that role, you don't do it like, in a very wholehearted manner, just because you don't really align with the person, and you're just doing a job for the hourly kind of whatever you're getting. So I think people really need to look at that from that standpoint. But in the team component, you also have another little piece, which is technology, right? Which I've seen you now talk about quite extensively. Yesterday, you put up a story about Advisor. Tell me about how you leverage technology as an agent better than everybody else.
I mean, I so vividly remember that was the key moment when I said, okay, fine, I'm leaving my old business and joining DDRE, because Daniel sat me down and showed me the client dashboard. And often, my clients would be all over the world, and kind of trying to report to them. I manually made my own like spreadsheet at my old firm, because the reporting mechanism was just terrible that they had. And I was like, these guys are selling £30 million homes and paying us a substantial amount, and we don't have like an effective way to report to them. It was terrible, and that took up so much of my time. And seeing this dashboard, which means, you would have seen on my story yesterday, I can tell my clients where in the world these buyers are coming from, kind of what is it that's kind of piquing their interest, because you can track what have I posted on socials, what's got the most engagement. And it's enabled me to work with brokers from all over the world. So I'm selling a penthouse in Holland Park at the moment at £32.5 million. And they had, in the rest of the development, had a few Americans coming in. And there are definitely far more Americans coming into the market. And so I deliberately targeted the brokers in the key markets in the US, so New York, Miami, and LA, with listings above $20 million. Was able to reach out to them, give them their advisor links, which you will know means they basically have a white labeled website with these details on it. And American agents particularly don't want to send out other agents' details, because they're really scared about losing their fee position. So to send them these links, and then was able to do set up like a Zoom presentation of this development, which then translated into viewings. And a lot of these brokers were at Douglas Elliman, who was the company aligned with my old firm. And being at my old firm, even though we had a partnership, I never received any viewings from them. I never had any communication with them, and they never had any incentive, you know, mainly financially, to bring their buyers over here. And now I literally can contact them directly, search them up, send them the links, and they'll come to me because they know they can get a fee, and it's just easy for them. And that's the thing, you need to make this whole process as frictionless as possible, deliver the information in the most efficient way possible, and make the potential transaction as frictionless as possible. And that's what this tech does.
I think it's very interesting how the brokerage model encourages this collaboration sort of culture quite a lot, because you still have those, let's say, big brand corporates that are all over the world, that can technically be like, oh, I have an office in this country and an office in that country. But the problem is that one person from their London office is not working with their New York office, and they just want to keep it for themselves. Whereas you're trying to pull in revenue from the whole world. And it's like if you're closing a deal and you're doing like, let's say 50% of the work, or you've just got the listing itself, it's like recurring revenue or rather revenue that you would otherwise missed. So I think it's really smart to do the whole advisor piece.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it's very smart.
Obviously we can do it internationally, but it actually works in the local markets as well. So even the agents who work at the big corporates, you know, the Savills, the Knight Frank, whatever it may be, they can still have their own advisor links, and they are then also more incentivized to share it with their buyers, you know? And I remember, it's funny, I'd send these links out and everyone would be like, what is this? Like, can you just send me a PDF brochure? And then an agent called me and said, can you send me one of your link thingies for me? And I was like, Daniel, Elliot, they want a link thingy. Like, this is the next
Rename
step.
it. Let's call it link thingy from now.
Yeah, but you know, that shows like it's slowly kind of infiltrating and, you know, they're getting it. So it means my clients have access to literally the whole market, locally and globally.
What do you find that, you mentioned American buyers, what do you find that they're looking for in the London sort of market? Why are they even here, to be honest?
It really depends, like more geographically where they're looking. So, you know, Kensington, there are a lot of big, nice houses there. You still kind of got easy access to the American school. It's green, you're close to Heathrow. But so Americans there have tended to go for kind of nice, big, substantial family houses, and they're going to be generally a more family buyer. In Mayfair, you've got tons of new developments there. A lot of Americans also wanting to buy in here, and they're wanting, you know, the ease of access, lock up and leave. You know, I can fly in and walk to everywhere that I need to walk to from my apartment. So it's more kind of like geographically specific, which then dictates what it is that they're actually looking for.
Gotcha. That's a very interesting thing. Like you said Kensington because it's close to Heathrow. Is that right? That's like a very unique thing to say about Kensington, I think. Because you don't really... Okay, so...
It's not like they're not buying there because it's... Like,
of course.
But it's Heathrow, like part when you're in there, you're like, oh, wow, I can get to Heathrow in 20 minutes. This is amazing.
Really?
You know?
20 minutes?
Well, you know, if you fly, if you're going out to Heathrow for a 7 o'clock in the morning flight,
Post-IPO, I'll give you a call about Kensington.
Okay, great.
But right now... but that's awesome. So my final question to you is, what advice would you give your 21-year-old self?
Don't get caught up in what other people are thinking and try to kind of mold yourself to that. I spent a long time worrying about what circles of people around me thought, and that definitely impacted how I spoke to myself, how I dealt with myself, and kind of how I started out in my career. And it's only when I kind of let go of, you know, that sentiment and negativity and kind of focused on myself and my own journey. You know, you still obviously like be a good person and put that energy out there, but when you focus on what you're doing and the right reasons for you rather than worrying about all of that, everything else kind of seems to fall into place and you have a much clearer head to look at everything. So
love that. I think it's so important, especially the part about talking to yourself, the way you talk to yourself, because people end up in ruts because of the fact that you're just in that loop, and sometimes you're just telling yourself that you can't, and then you're actually beating yourself up. But when you take a step back and look at it, you're fine. You know, Jess, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been amazing. And for those of you that are watching this, don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel and come back next week for yet another episode of The Real Ones.